Hey guys, let's talk about this week's episode of Masters of Sex and another great installment this week. The study is still going full steam ahead, and we had a lot going on between Bill and Virginia. So they decided in this week's episode that they were going to try to videotape their subjects. And of course, we had Jane, who has been pretty much their number one participant, and she's pretty much been up for anything. And so when they ask her if she's willing to be videotaped, she says, okay, but you can't film me above the head, and you can't film me, you can't reveal any body parts on me that people might know that it's me. And so they agree, of course. And when they do this video study, they're trying to capture, the different emotions your body goes through when it's having an orgasm. We see her gripping the bed with her hands. We see her toes curling up and, kind of having its own little spasm. And earlier on in the episode, Virginia and Bill had their session together, and she scratched him. And, they're trying to say, because people believe that when you would scratch your partner or you'd get kind of physical, it meant that you were enjoying yourself and you just couldn't control yourself. But it's more about that you can't control yourself. You really have no clue as to what your body is doing when it's going through this orgasmic state. And they're trying to capture that on film. So they do a really good job. And of course, when Jane sees what she looks like, she's mortified and she doesn't want anybody to see this, and she pretty much tells them to destroy the tape. And so it was a very interesting revelation, because for her, it's one thing to have sex and them study her sex and have it written down on these chart papers, but then to actually visually see herself doing it, I think it flicked a switch in her mind that thought, oh my God, she's doing something bad now. She's seen as more maybe scandalous. And they're paying her for this services, and so she even gives the money back, because I feel like she thinks that she's like a prostitute, kind of like a whore. And, so it was really revealing that she would have that kind of a reaction to it. And of course, when she decided that she wasn't going to do it, Virginia offered to do it. And she does. And of course, Bill, being the voyeur, being, very much taken by Virginia, is videotaping her. And we know that they've already crossed this line. Like, he's fully cheating on his wife. Even though they're trying to make it seem like it's all for science, you know what I mean? But Libby is home, is unaware that these two are doing this, and they're doing it multiple times. They've done it multiple times, I should say. And so when he starts videotaping her, of course, he's looking at her and seeing, and he even pans the camera up to her face. So, it's less about her body and what's going on with her body, but more about what's happening in her face and her facial expressions. So I thought, oh my God, that's going to be trouble. And then at the end of the episode, his mom confronts him, because his mom and him have a very estranged relationship, and it all stems back to when he was younger. And I guess that the father was not a really good husband or father to Bill, and he treated them badly, and it seems like he was abusive and everything. And Bill has a lot of issues with his mom because of it. And one of the things that Libby asked of her when she told Bill's mom that she was pregnant, that if she could work on the relationship with Bill, because it's important that he can bond with his mom again. And so she goes to see him, and she's like, what are you doing here late at night doing the study? And he basically tells her, he's like, I'm doing this, I'm studying sex, I'm watching people have sex, I'm doing this. And he pretty much does it in a way to try to shock her and make her go, oh my gosh, I'm blushing. And yet her reaction is completely opposite. And she's like, okay, well, people have been having sex for years before I was, so it's not that big a deal. And at one point she comes over and she sits down and she's talking with all of them, and she can see the different relationship that's happening between Virginia and Bill when they're sitting at this table. And she reads this performance review that Bill did for her, and it's very personal and emotional, and the mother's looking at the two of them, and she can tell that something's going on, and she confronts Bill about this. And when she does, Bill completely denies it, and of course sends the mother off, trying to act as if he's not having this affair. And it was very interesting to see that relationship between his mom and him, and how much she does see the truth in Bill, but that he doesn't want them to get any closer than they are at this moment. And so by the time the episode ends with Bill and Virginia's storyline, he says to her, I feel like I've been taking advantage of you, and I'm going to basically pay you what you're worth. And he gives her an envelope full of money. And of course, Virginia's like, well, what is this for? And he's like, it's for your services. And she's like, well, are you going to pay yourself too? Because you're doing this study too. And he's like, well, of course not. Because he's like, this is my study. He's like, this is, and she's like, well, this is our study. And she quickly has this like look of horror on her face, which is pretty much similar to how Jane felt, which is that she's, like a prostitute and she's getting paid to do this when really, this is all part of the study in her mind. So she takes off and she's crying and she runs to her car and, she's devastated that Bill would do this to her. But again, these guys have blurred the lines between their relationship. Yeah, you can act as if this is all for science, but at the end of the day, you guys know that you guys have a much stronger connection than you're both willing to admit to. And, it's time for them to really address it and speak on it, because they're playing with fire and one of them is about to get burned. So in the B storyline this week, we had Ethan and Vivian, and they got engaged in the last episode. And in this episode, she finds out that he's Jewish, but he's not really Jewish, but, in her mind he is, and she wants him to convert. And he says he will, but then he doesn't. And ultimately they end up breaking up because they're just not right for each other. And we all know that he still holds a torch for Virginia. And at the end of the episode, when Virginia had run off to her car and he sees her crying, and he goes to confront her. And they kind of have this nice moment. And, I don't know where that's going to lead to. I have a feeling that it's probably going to lead to them getting down to the business. Because, at the end of the day, she's single. She's not with anybody right now, even as much as she wants to protest that she's not with Bill, and he wants to act like he's not. They are together, but they're not. So, is this going to lead to the two of them getting a little hot and heavy? Possibly. The show has definitely blurred the lines with all of these relationships. And, Libby finally told Bill that she was pregnant, and he's like, how can that be? And she pretty much called him out on his BS, which was that, he was blaming her for the fact that she wasn't able to get pregnant when it was really his low sperm count. And, they both pretty much said, listen, we've both made mistakes and we both just have to own up to it, and that's that. And we have to move forwards from here. So, all these storylines kind of going on, and it's sort of like, how honest are each being with each other? And the whole thing of this episode was about their performance reviews and how they were doing, and it was all interesting that they were all kind of getting each other's performance reviews without even realizing it. And Virginia is getting a great performance review from her her teacher, because she's doing really well in the class, and even her students are trying to get her to become their study teacher. But it's like they're just using her because she's smart and she knows it, but she doesn't have time to dedicate to them because she's busy working on this more important study. But I think we ultimately see that Virginia is very smart, and she's pretty much capable of doing everything, and that's great to see as a woman. And but she is also very easily damaged, and she's very emotional. And she even said that when she ultimately gave herself her own performance review. And that's one of the things that she's going to have to really work on, or she's just going to have to come to terms with that she's an emotional person and address it. So another good episode this week. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too, guys. All right, leave a comment down below, and we'll talk later. Okay, bye, guys.